Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church in Naperville, Illinois for August 7th, 2022. I am Laura Kuber, and my pronouns are she, her. We are so glad you're here, whether you're present in the sanctuary this morning or watching remotely. It's so good to be together. To keep all of us as safe as possible, we'll remain masked except those of us on the chancel will remove our masks to speak from the microphone. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another on our spiritual and religious journeys. Whether you are a member or friend of this congregation or have recently discovered us, we're glad that you're with us this morning. Whoever you are and wherever you are welcome here. So we have one announcement for this morning. And that is that our new settled minister, Mandy Huizinga, has officially begun her work here at DuPage UU Church. We are delighted to have her here. Mandy is excited to get to know us, and you can find her information in our weekly church emails and the August newsletter on how to contact her and schedule time with her. Note that we will hold an informal meet and greet with Mandy next Sunday, August 14th, after the service. So save the date for next Sunday for the meet and greet. Finally, we are grateful for the help of our many Sunday volunteers, including the greeters, offering counters, service speakers, song leaders, tech team, and ushers that make our services accessible and welcoming. Thank you all for being here this morning. It's time to light our chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. I'm Kat Gelder, chair of the Sunday Services Committee, and my pronouns are she, her. We gather today at the beginning of a new month, at the beginning of a new school year, at the beginning of a new ministry at our church. It is also a time of endings, the end of a church year, the end of summer vacation. Perhaps each of us is always at the conclusion of one thing and the beginning of another. Being part of a community means being part of a circle of giving, where we both give and receive care, in a constant ebb and flow. We lend a listening ear, and we share the concerns that weigh on us. We bring food to those who are ill, and we ask for help if we need it. We attend programs on social justice, and we organize potlucks that bring people together. We do this not in expectation of complete reciprocity, getting back what we gave. Rather, we give to others when we are able, and we have faith in others that they will be there for us when we are in need. Today, the Sunday Services Committee asked some members of our church to speak about how participating in the church has been personally meaningful or spiritually fulfilling to them. In this time of harvest, as we embark on new journeys this year, may we move forward with gratitude for each other and faith in our collective power. And now it is time to gather. And so I invite everyone of all ages to remain where you are, but to watch the beautiful pictures from our story today. My story is about believing in an idea and acting on it. In our Unitarian Universalist community, we celebrate each other's ideas even if they are different than anyone else's. And we also want to support people in our community when they want to do something with their idea, to make a difference and to support their community by acting on what they believe. Our story today is Wanda's Roses by Pat Brisson. One morning in spring on the way to school, Wanda noticed a bush growing in an empty corner lot. It was surrounded by trash and heaps of junk. It must have been growing for a while because it was about 2 feet tall, and Wanda was surprised she hadn't noticed it before. But there it was, bare and thorny, and Wanda, who loved beautiful things, felt her heart beat faster. "A rose bush," she said to herself, "my very own rose bush." Now, the rose bush didn't really belong to Wanda, but since nobody seemed to own the lot or the heaps of junk that were piled there, she decided to care for this bush and make it her own. All during school, she thought about her rose bush. During art, she drew pictures of what it would look like in bloom. During library, she borrowed books on arranging flowers. During science, she asked so many questions about how to care for roses that finally her teacher said that she really must stop talking and asking questions about roses and start thinking about electricity, which is what the lesson was about. On her way home from school, she rushed to the rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needed some more sun, thought Wanda. So she put down her school bag and began dragging some of the nearby trash out to the curb. Mrs. Turner, who was on her way to the store, stopped her to help her move a broken chair. "Cleaning up the neighborhood, Wanda?" Mrs. Turner asked. "That's a nice project for you." "Oh, I'm not just cleaning," said Wanda. "I'm helping my rose bush so it will get more sun, so it will bloom." "Your rose bush?" Mrs. Turner asked. "Where is your rose bush?" Wanda said, "Over there," and pointed proudly to the bare, thorny bush. "Oh, Wanda, I'm not so sure that's a rose bush," Mrs. Turner said gently. "Sure it is," said Wanda. "I've seen rose bushes in books, and this is what they look like before they bloom. You just wait. In a few weeks, this lot will be full of roses." "Well," said Mrs. Turner, shaking her head, "good luck with it, Wanda." And as she walked away, Mrs. Turner thought to herself, "If that's a rose bush, then I am the Queen of England." The next day after school, Wanda hurried to her rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needs more air, thought Wanda. So she put down her school bag and began taking more of the trash out to the curb. "Once I get all this trash out of here, nothing will block the air from getting to my rose bush," thought Wanda. Mr. Claudel was on his way home from work, and he saw Wanda trying to drag an old door, and he stopped to help. "Cleaning up the neighborhood, are you, Wanda?" he asked. "Not just cleaning, Mr. Claudel," Wanda told him. "I'm getting rid of trash so that my rose bush will get more air." "A rose bush? Here?" he asked. And so Wanda showed him the rose bush. "I don't know much about gardening, Wanda," said Mr. Claudel, frowning, "but I don't think that's a rose bush." "Sure it is," said Wanda, "and in a few weeks this lot will be filled with the sweetest smelling roses you ever saw." She thanked him for his help and went off to drag away some more trash. Mr. Claudel shook his head. "If that's a rose bush," he said to himself, "then I'm the King of France." Every day after school that week and the next, Wanda worked in the empty lot. Mrs. Giamani, who lived in the apartment next door, gave Wanda trash bags for the old shoes, bottles, broken toys, and bits of glass that she was picking up. "You've done a great job of cleaning up this lot, Wanda," Mrs. Giamani told her. "Oh, I'm not just cleaning," Wanda said. "I have to get rid of all this trash so my rose bush will get enough sun and fresh air to bloom." "But where is your rose bush?" she asked Wanda. So Wanda showed her. Mrs. Giamani put her hand on Wanda's shoulder and spoke softly to her. "Wanda," she said, "this is not a rose bush." "Oh, but it is," said Wanda, "and in a few weeks this lot will be filled with the most beautiful roses that you ever saw." "That would be nice," said Mrs. Giamani, "But I don't want you to be disappointed if this bush doesn't bloom." "Don't worry, I won't be disappointed," Wanda answered. Mrs. Giamani sighed. "This is not a rose bush, and it never will be one," she thought to herself. The next week, when the rose bush still wasn't blooming, Wanda talked to her school librarian. "I need some books about getting roses to bloom," she told Mrs. Jones. "Oh, do you have a rose bush, Wanda?" Mrs. Jones asked. "Yes, but it doesn't have flowers yet, and I know it has enough sun and fresh air," Wanda replied. "Does it have enough water?" Mrs. Jones asked. "Water," Wanda said. "Of course, that will make it bloom." And that afternoon, she hurried to the rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. She looked at the dry ground and she smiled. "Don't worry, little bush," she said. "I'll get you some water, and then you will be able to grow flowers." Wanda went across the street to the butcher shop. "Mr. Sanchez, would you please give me some water for my rose bush?" "Rose bush? Is that what I see you taking care of and talking to every day out there?" "Are you sure that's a rose bush, Wanda?" Mr. Sanchez asked. "Oh, yes, I'm sure, but it can't bloom because it needs water." Mr. Sanchez gave her a plastic bucket. "I hope that really is a rose bush, Wanda," he said, looking at her doubtfully. "You'll see," Wanda told him. "In a few weeks, that whole lot will be full of roses." As Wanda carried the water to her rose bush, Mr. Sanchez muttered, "In a few weeks, that thorn bush will still be a thorn bush." Every day, Wanda ran to her rose bush after school, but every day it was still bare and thorny. She watered it and sang to it and checked its bare branches for roses. Mrs. Turner, on her way to the butcher's shop, stopped to see if there were any roses yet. Mr. Claudel, on his way home from work, stopped to see if there were any roses yet. Mrs. Giamani, seeing Wanda in the lot, called down to her apartment to ask if there were any roses yet. And when Wanda went to the library at school, Mrs. Jones asked if there were any roses yet. And every day when Wanda went to the butcher shop for water, Mr. Sanchez asked if there were any roses yet. To each person, Wanda would answer the same thing. "Just you wait. Pretty soon the whole lot will be filled with roses." And then one day in June, Wanda had an idea. Looking at the bare, thorny bush, she said, "If my rose bush won't give roses to me, I'll just have to give roses to my rose bush." And when she saw Mrs. Turner, Mr. Claudel, Mrs. Giamani, Ms. Jones, and Mr. Sanchez, she gave each of them an invitation that said, "Please come for tea and muffins in Wanda's rose garden, Saturday morning at 9. "Oh dear," said Mrs. Turner, "is she still expecting to get roses from that bush?" "Oh no," said Mr. Claudel, "and she's worked so hard too." "Oh my," said Mrs. Giamani, "she'll be so disappointed." "Oh darn," said Mr. Sanchez, "there must be something that I can do." "Oh good," said Miss Jones, who had only heard about the bush from Wanda and had not seen it herself. "I'll bring some muffins." And the next morning at 9, everyone was surprised to see Wanda's rose bush covered with roses. Paper roses that Wanda had made herself and carefully tied to each bare, thorny branch. But more surprising yet, everyone who came to the party had brought along a rose bush to plant near Wanda's, except Ms. Jones, who brought delicious blueberry muffins. After they had eaten their muffins and drunk their tea, they all got busy planting rose bushes. Mr. Claudel and Mrs. Turner dug the holes. Mrs. Giamani held the bushes in place, while Wanda and Ms. Jones filled in around the roots with soil. and Mr. Sanchez brought water from his shop and watered them all thoroughly. When the work was finished, Mr. Claudel said, "Wanda, this is going to be a rose garden fit for a king." "Or a queen," said Mrs. Turner. Wanda and the others smiled. And later that summer, the whole lot was filled with the biggest, most beautiful, sweetest smelling roses that anyone had ever seen, just as Wanda had always said it would be. And now the youth may go to religious education with their leaders as we rise in body and spirit to sing our affirmation.
I invite you to join me in the responsive reading, The Larger Circle by Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us, and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms, and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all creatures, passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance, to a music so subtle and vast that no one hears it, except in fragments. And now, please rise in body or spirit and join us in hymn number 360, Here We Have Gathered.
Good morning. Good morning? Good? Okay. My name is Joan Doyle, and my pronouns are she, her. Kat asked me to spend a few minutes talking about how participating at DUUC has been personally meaningful and spiritually fulfilling for me. We'll leave spiritually fulfilling part aside for now. I've never really thought of... Okay, I'll talk about it now. I've never really thought of myself as spiritual, but who knows? Maybe you can teach an old dog new tricks. But personally meaningful, I could and do go on forever about what I get out of being a DUUC member. A couple of highlights, of course, starting with my daughter. In middle school, Annie was in the first coming of age class here, which was absolutely wonderful to experience together. There were a lot of good kids in that age group, and I just loved watching them grow up. Then when she was in high school, we got to go through something a little deeper with TAG. There are a variety of other things she did, including a week at Midwest Leadership School and several cons, but I don't want to make this a commercial for Youth RE. So am I talking too much about my daughter? Maybe. And don't get me started on my granddaughter, or I'll never stop. But to a parent and a single mom to boot, there's nothing better than seeing your child blossom into a marvelous young adult. I'm going to say that's pretty personally meaningful. Okay, while Annie was stretching her wings, I was here too, coming to church every Sunday, finding my place to discover the joys of connecting with others, to stretch my mind and become involved. At first, I joined committees to make things better here at church itself, organizing potlucks and the like. As time went on, I became more involved in activities outside the church, sometimes having to deal with people who challenged me. Not sure that I expected that, but it has been very rewarding. And in my 20 years here, I have made outstanding friendships, some of which will be with me forever. For this and so much more, I am eternally grateful. Now, spiritually, well, a couple of weeks ago, I listened to the BYOT service, and it really spoke to me. So much so that I reached out to Caroline Bailey to see if she was going to offer the class again this year. But now that she's on the board, she doesn't have the time to do that, and she suggested I contact Dean Reschke and Adult RE. So perhaps after 10 weeks of studying my own theology, I can report back next year on spiritual fulfillment. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Joan. Appreciate it. We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows. We remember those facing health challenges and those experiencing losses. Within our own community, Pat Clancy was delighted to attend a family gathering on Friday and see her 15-month-old great-granddaughter, Nora. Yes. And Nora's mom and dad, Kaylee and Nick. We also join Edna Groves and the Groves family in sorrow at the passing of Tom Groves. Tom and Edna were long-term members of our church before moving to Idaho. Further details from the Groves family are forthcoming. Even when the cares of the world weigh on us, may we find joy in our connections with each other and the pleasures that life holds. Let us care for one another and for ourselves in all the ways that we can. As we hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows, whether spoken or unspoken, let us take a moment to be quiet together. The words of George E. Odell. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure yet again. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands to prepare us for the journey. All our lives, we are in need, and others are in need of us.
Good morning. This morning, in the few minutes I have, I'd like to focus on the sacredness and high value I experience in our church's small group gatherings. Here's a poem, I call it Bob's Bad Poetry, that I wrote to express some of the precious experience of inspiring belonging that I find in our small group gatherings. Inside the UU-convened safe circle, discovering each other, our universally felt joys and sorrows, we're not so different after all. Our church, I feel, can be a sanctuary for exploring our potential for growth and self-expression. It can be a garden, like the rose garden in our story earlier, with rich soil, well-watered for our growth. When Kat Gelder called me a few weeks ago and asked if I'd participated in the service, I realized that this is an opportunity to reflect with an attitude of gratitude on the DUUC community, to honor and to not take for granted the tremendous impact this religious community has on my life. I have been especially moved personally by the opportunities at our church for small group gathering, sharing in our covenant and chalice circles, our spiritual direction groups, our annual retreats, our Zoom meditation groups, our auction event dinners, and especially my 22 years as a member of the men's group. And speaking of auction events, by the way, I don't think my wife Caroline and I would have much of a social life at all without auction events to attend throughout the year. Often these small group gatherings allow deep sharing interspersed with silence that allows me the privilege of experiencing knowing and being known by others in a safe and sometimes covenanted confidential circle of people on a regular basis. And I found that if the group is structured so that there is an opportunity to hear from each and every person, and, for example, in the spiritual direction group, to reflect and share on what each person has said, with the covenantal caveat in some of our groups, not all of them, that there is no attempt to fix problems and no attempt to comfort me if I share tears or brokenheartedness. I'll get back to that one. It can be especially meaningful. These covenant rules may sound a little restrictive, but they can be quite a liberating structure, since I don't have to worry about burdening other people in the group with the need to fix my problem or to comfort me in my distress, if that's part of the covenant. These groups have been an amazing spiritual practice that promotes a deep sense of belonging and feeling at home. To use religious language, that's one of the places I experience the sacred. And it also fits my sense of adventuring. For a retired social worker, you might expect this. What kind of traveling do I most enjoy? Relationship traveling, relationship exploration, and the journey of inner discovery of myself and others. Sharing together in our small groups can be like reading a well-written novel. I especially enjoy hearing marvelous, surprising stories unfolding from our often aging bodies, telling of our younger-bodied experiences of exotic-sounding places, adventures, risks taken, and sharing of lessons learned. And another benefit, it's sort of humbling, actually, a humbling benefit. Were you ever in a conversation with someone when your stereotypical assumptions about someone, based on their appearance, fell away as you realized you had radically underestimated their wisdom, their gifts, and their experiences? These humbling and challenging moments of connection have helped me to get beyond my cultural blinders, those prejudices, and my middle-class, straight, white, male privileged perspectives that lead me to unconsciously devalue people based on their body appearance, dress, age, disability and diagnosis, legal status, criminal history. I have co-led groups at Cook County Jail, and the sort of brings tears to my eyes. The caring and the wisdom of those incarcerated men is amazing. I totally underestimated it, even though I'm a social worker and should know better. So my blinders related to criminal history, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, class, culture, and educational level. The small group sharing instead repeatedly has given me the unexpected gift of deeply felt sense of profound connection and a realization of our common humanity, our shared joys and struggles underneath our outward differences. And incidentally, I've learned personally more not only about others, but about myself. As one example, regarding my own complexity, fluidity, and non-either-orness of sexual orientation and gender identity for me personally. Becoming more accepting and at home with all the parts and potentials of my personality. It's nice to be part of a faith tradition that is welcoming to me, no matter what I discover my sexual orientation or gender identity to be, as I evolve and grow in self-understanding. I truly appreciate the many opportunities to convene in safe spaces and have these close proximity experiences with people I would not normally have connected to, and have the wonderful experience of having the scales drop from my eyes and marvel at our beautiful and enriching common humanity. And a few last comments. As an introvert, I find small groups to be particularly helpful, since the regularly scheduled meeting times connect me with others when I might be too shy to initiate phone calls or get-together gatherings on my own. And as a man, I've often felt it's harder to develop and maintain friendships without a regular meeting structure to plug into, because social norms in our culture don't support spontaneous male relationship building and intimacy. So lastly, thank you, DUC, my chosen extended family and rich source of opportunities for connection.
The programs and operations of the church are supported by voluntary contributions of our members and friends. Each month, we share our offerings with an organization nominated by the congregation and selected by the special offering team. This month's organization is Saret Charitable Fund, which was established to support families during hard times, including chronic illness and loss of employment. The morning's offerings to support the work of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church and of Saret is given and received in a spirit of generosity and gratitude.
We are, in the words of Wendell Berry, part of a larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in dance. We are, in the words of George Odell, in need of others all our lives, and others are in need of us. We are creating a rose garden, planted by ourselves and our elders, nurtured by our children. We are grateful to Joan and Robert for sharing their journeys with us this morning, and we are grateful to you for gathering here with us this morning, for the gifts that you bring to our community through your work, your compassion, your needs, and your talents. Thank you for being a part of this community, whether for the first time today, for a month, for years, or for a lifetime. And now please rise in body or in spirit and join us in hymn number 347, Gather the Spirits. We'll sing verses 1 and 2.
Today, we will extinguish the chalice with a responsive reading. It is a responsive reading that has been used with several religious education classes here at our church. Please join me for the words in italics. We extinguish this flame, but not its spirit. May it warm and light our lives until we meet again.
Our benediction this morning is the words of Laurelyn Bellamy. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace.